Good morning. Good morning to those of you joining us from Europe, and good afternoon to those of you joining us from Asia. We hope you're having a good day. Welcome to this conference board webcast on the future of talent attraction. This is the first in a series of webcasts that we're quite excited about, looking at employee centricity and the future of work. I'm Tara Murphy. I'm the Council Director for the Talent Acquisition Executives Council in Europe. I'm also the Council Director for the Strategic Workforce Planning Council and the HR Operations Council, and I will be your moderator for today's webcast. Before we go any further, before we get started, I'd like to talk to you a little bit and just brief you a little bit about the platform we're using today. On the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you see a Share Your Questions box. We really hope this is going to be an interactive session, so please, as your questions come up, type them in and I will try and weave them into the conversation as we go along. You can also download the materials today, the presentation and the report from Ajinga in the middle box. You can also, if you wish at any time, full screen by clicking on the 4 arrows on the top of the presentation screen. There are credits available for today if you wish to use them. You need to type in, again, that's on the bottom part of your screen, enter the credit type, and then type in your full name and your email address. You need to be logged in for the full session or for the full webcast today, and credits are only available on the live broadcast. Yeah. 2 other housekeeping things. If you can complete the evaluation at the end, that's really helpful to us because it gives us feedback and helps us improve our program. And also, this webcast will be available on demand from our website, so you can reconnect with it, or you can share it with colleagues. Yeah, there's the slide again in terms of earning credits, and we've touched on that. What I'd like to do now is to introduce you to our panelists today. We're really excited about this webcast. It's been talking about how do we bring perspectives from around the world together. So we're delighted that we have Catherine Coombs, Regional Head and Director of Talent Acquisition for APAC and China with LinkedIn. Catherine is a member of the LinkedIn Global Talent Acquisition Leadership Team and was a founding member of the APAC LinkedIn team. So really a fantastic perspective in terms of Asia and what's going on. We're delighted also to introduce Beecher Ashley Brown. Beecher is a co-founder and Senior Vice President of Ajinga. And Ajinga, as most of you in Asia will know, and I think a lot of us in Europe know too, is one of China's leading recruitment technology providers, in connecting in all different ways using data, candidate work, supporting candidate selection, etc., and working with Wechat. So really excited. And finally, I'm delighted to introduce you to Lopa Patel, who is Director of Talent Acquisition for Tetra Pak International. And again, Lopa is somebody who is passionate about talent acquisition, particularly in terms of the quality of hire and the experience of the total hiring process, but in particular in terms of how we attract talent. And Lopa has, been passionate about talent acquisition for a long time and has worked with many other companies, including Philip Morris, GSK, DSM, etc. So again, we have a wealth of experience with from Europe, from Asia, from technical innovators. So really happy to introduce and welcome you this morning. Just a couple of words before we jump into the discussion. The context for this webcast today is really in terms of the pressures and the changing world. So technology is disrupting every stage of business, not just the employee life cycle, but business. The CEOs in the C-suite challenge this year identified that recruiting and retaining talent is their top internal hot button issue, and that's seen as an issue going forward and seen as potentially constraining innovation. So the need for future skills, the talk is all about digital skills, but there's a lot about reskilling existing roles, and of course candidate expectations. So this slide looks at employee centricity and the future of work, and the webcast series would look at each element of this cycle. Today is really about candidate centricity and talent attraction. So as we start, before we get into our specific questions, I'd like to ask our panelists to please share with us your recent experiences in the area of attraction and what you see as emerging trends. And Catherine, I'd be delighted if we could start with you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me onto the call. I'm delighted to be here today. So I think for us, what's super exciting is that certainly at a C-suite level, talent acquisition is seen as a strategic partner more and more so. And part of the reason why that is the case is that aside from the fact that talent is needed to be the company's #1 priority, it's also fiercely competitive, and therefore an organization needs to understand how they will stand out and what is that value proposition that they can give to a candidate and their employees. And I think, as you pointed out before, technology is playing a more expansive role in talent attraction, and therefore it's super important to make sure that we're able to maintain that human connection. And what each of us is seeking is wanting to be valued. So as we go on this exercise of attracting talent to an organization, how do we work efficiently, but also ensure that we put the candidate first and extend that value proposition to them. From a LinkedIn standpoint, some of the areas that we're really focused on, certainly social, which is probably not surprising to many folks. We're definitely trialing different automation tools to give an unbiased approach to talent attraction, but also create an experience for some of the talent that's coming through our channels. And then lastly, really thinking about how can we share what we consider to be our value proposition, being our culture, in a more scalable way. And one of the ways that we are doing that is video. And I think that automation of video and those types of mediums are what we will continue to see play a bigger and bigger role in talent attraction.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Beecher, do you want to share your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I think there's a number of trends going on, but I think what may be useful for those folks who are not so familiar with the China talent acquisition landscape is I can spend a couple of minutes on context setting.
Super. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that we probably need to recognize is China's pretty different. So my company, Ajinga, we operate here in China, and the Chinese internet has developed quite differently from the internet in other parts of Asia and certainly in North America and Europe. And the big sort of the reason why that's developed differently is, of course, China's firewall, and that's blocked many of the world's leading social media and tech companies like Google and Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram. But of course, we do have, and we love to use LinkedIn here, but a lot of these other providers are blocked. So that means China's internet and the players in Chinese internet have developed very, very differently. So one is China's different. The second thing is China's digital maturity is extremely advanced. So when we talk about internet in China, we're really talking about mobile internet. So in the absence of these Facebooks and the Googles, the domestic players here in China, Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, Jingdong, etc., they've really developed to meet the needs of the domestic market, and the domestic market is by and large skipped the PC and embraced wholeheartedly the mobile internet. So to give you sort of an example of the digital maturity and how advanced that is, if we look at the Chinese population, around 71% of the population here use mobile social media on a daily basis. And that's compared to a very mature market, say the US, where it's only 61%, and in France, where it's maybe 50%, compared with a worldwide average of only 42%. So 71% of the population logging on to the internet via mobile every day. The average time they spend on a mobile internet is 3 hours and 19 minutes here in China versus 2 hours and 24 minutes in the US and only 1 hour and 25 minutes in France. And 49% of Chinese internet users have used voice search or voice controls, like an Alexa or a Siri or something like that. 49% of Chinese use that. So the digital maturity here is incredible. So what are people doing on the mobile internet? That's clearly social. So there's something called Wechat. Some of you may know, some of you maybe don't know. But that's known as the app for everything here. And at the most basic level, it's for messaging. But companies are able to set up their official accounts and broadcast content to their followers. And then their followers, they can try to engage with, for example, mobile commerce with them. And so it's become a very, very sophisticated mobile commerce environment. And that has shaped the expectations of everybody within Wechat, of which there are 1.1 billion users, so that everything they do within Wechat comes with a consumer mindset. So to take advantage of this huge and very sticky Wechat experience, a lot of companies have set up their sales and marketing accounts, but now we found in a recent survey with the American Chamber of Commerce here in Shanghai that around half of companies have set up a Wechat account specifically for the purpose of talent acquisition and employer branding. And around, in the retail space at least, around 16% of total hires are now coming through Wechat. 16% of total applications are coming through from Wechat and 14% of total hires. So it is a very mature digital environment here. It's a very social digital environment because it's Wechat enabled, and it's become an incredibly important channel for talent acquisition. And everybody in that channel has the mindset of a consumer. So that hopefully sets a little bit of the context about trends in general, but also the sort of situation, technology and social situation for talent acquisitions here in China.
Fascinating. And I'm looking forward to going into that a little bit further as the discussion develops. Lopa, from your perspective, what are you seeing in terms of talent attraction experiences and emerging trends?
Good morning, Tara. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you also for inviting me to be part of this webcast. Building on Catherine and Beech's points, I think what I'm seeing quite specifically is around the end-to-end value chain of activity and interaction, around ecosystems, around how we touch the talent that we're talking with and engaging with, around social media, the entire journey from attraction to how we use social media to how we interact with the talent with regard to the experience that they have. So I think in terms of my most recent experiences, they're around things such as building ecosystems, looking at how simplification and technology can play a role. I'm also seeing relationships becoming more and more important. So the accessibility of positions that we see in organizations 20, 30 years ago, you would apply writing a letter and you'd wait patiently for applicants, for the company to respond, for applicants to apply. And today, the accessibility of organizations, employers, people is so high that every touch point becomes critical. So I think personally, for me, my most recent experience to summarize is more and more around the value of every touch point in the value chain of what we do in talent acquisition, from, as I mentioned, from starting with sourcing, assessment, and even the offer process. So it's the total end-to-end journey that I'm seeing is starting to change and more impactful.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks to all of you, because I think in terms of environment, you've painted, an incredibly competitive environment, and we know that from a talent perspective and from the technology perspective, the need to focus on the value proposition. And then I think this energy that Beecher has portrayed in terms of coming out of China, in terms of that digital maturity, that focus on mobile, and then that sort of reconnect in terms of simplification and those relationships. So thanks a lot in terms of helping us set the context. When we said today was about the candidate lens. So, how do you see businesses working to understand? With any consumer, you need to understand what are their needs, what are their expectations, and then as a business, you have to discuss and decide, can you meet those expectations? Everybody wants to, but ultimately it also needs to be efficient, affordable, etc. So maybe Lopa, if you could kick us off in terms of saying, what are you seeing businesses trying to do to better understand candidate expectations and then to try and meet those?
Thanks, Tara. I think it's preaching to the converted, maybe to the audience who's listening in, but I feel like the one thing I'm seeing a lot of today is mapping of candidate journeys and the experience. So really trying to understand what is the experience of the individual that's going through a process within our organization. So what impact and what impression does that give them in our organization? I think adopting practices or old age practices in marketing, such as persona mapping, is something that I'm seeing a lot of. I've done that personally in my current organization. We're about to start in previous organizations I've worked with. And I think the persona mapping has resulted in more efficient and more short and more simple processes, much more aligned to making the experience more enjoyable for the individual going through it, but at the same time, making it efficient and not going overboard on areas we don't need to. So where I see efficiencies are in tech and how we use tools. It's about how we use assessment and bringing in new ways of working, such as gamification. So I think in reality, it's about saying every candidate could also be a consumer to our business, and how do we make sure we welcome them in the same way that we would a consumer coming into our organization to buy a product or within the portfolio. And it's about looking at how can we make sure that we map those processes in the same way. I don't think it's personally not more complicated than that at the moment.
Okay. Catherine,
Yeah.
how are you seeing your own company and others doing this in terms of understanding and meeting expectations?
Yeah, I mean, if I start with thinking about, probably like that largest talent pool, right, which is like the millennial Gen Z population, this is a population that has grown up in a very uncertain time, and they are very connected to social, political, economic progress. I think that they have also grown up in a very technology-driven environment, and so therefore some of the things like their optimism and trust are a little more scarce probably than an environment where we grew up, and therefore this is prompted by things like unequal pay, their trust on social platforms, some of the stuff that we've seen in the media. I think they're quite skeptical about business motives, and they're very sensitive to the agenda that a business is driving versus how that business is thinking about its impact on society. I think that they are very values-driven individuals. They're seeking that alignment, their own values to those values of a company. It's not unfamiliar to see consumers or candidates pull away from companies or products that where they see misalignment of values. And I think this is also a demographic that they're very interested in travel and seeing the world. I saw a recent study around actually this population prioritizing organizations that are more committed to creating an impact on society and the community than actually joining companies like that, rather than some other things that we've seen in the past that candidates are typically attracted to. I think when we kind of keep all of that in mind and thinking that that is like a large population of the talent that we're talking to, we do need to think about ways that we can position, our authentic brands that will align to what this community is seeking. And there's a lot of data out there at the moment that can talk to what those talent segments that we're interested in are reading, where they're consuming that content. And what's important is then obviously taking our authentic culture or our authentic value proposition and putting it in front of that group in a place that they are consuming it, and sharing what we have to offer that's compelling. So I think that it's super, super important for us to keep in mind what's of value to the candidates, and do that in a way that that is streamlined.
Fascinating, because I think it's also fascinating in terms of how you have that conversation internally in the business, because in terms of, I suppose, talent acquisition, you're very connected, you see that, but that the whole business needs to understand that that's, the direction and expectations of what they're hoping will be their future workforce.
Right.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Beecher, how do you see expectations? How are people trying to understand and meet those expectations?
Yeah, thank you. I think there are a number of themes in terms of what candidates are expecting based on what we see from consumer behavior on the mobile social internet. I think the first theme is really around content. So consumers in the mobile social internet don't really want their social media filled up with advertisements and spammed with just generic content that maybe is of limited relevance to them. So I think in many places around the world there is this sort of retreat to more personalized messaging from peer-to-peer or private groups, rather than just simply putting stuff out there in a common feed. Certainly Wechat's been built around one-to-one communication, one-to-group communication, so it's more about private chats. So the content that mobile commerce people develop is really based around very close understanding of what their consumers are doing, their behavior, their preferences, and then delivering very specific content. And I think going forward, what talent acquisition and employer branding professionals are increasingly going to be doing is developing or segmenting their talent pools into talent communities, understanding their interests, their drivers, and then serving up very personalized content through a social CRM approach. So I think content is one of the themes from a consumer expectation that we can learn from in talent acquisition. I think convenience is the second theme. So a consumer can buy something in the mobile commerce world and have it probably delivered to his or her house later that evening in China. The delivery times are incredibly quick, and that maybe it's something small like groceries, or it could be a mobile phone, but it can even be cars. Cars can be purchased on Wechat here. So what we as recruiters and talent acquisition need to think about is, how do we make our application experiences as quick as possible? And if we're linking them up to global systems, and due to the firewall, maybe the page takes 20 seconds or more to open, then we're going to lose the interest and certainly the respect of a lot of our candidates. So convenience, I think, is the second theme in terms of what we can learn from, or what we can observe from consumers. I think one of the themes that I've been very surprised by is video. So globally, there's an app called TikTok, and that's owned by a Chinese entity called ByteDance that developed the local version of that first, I believe, and that's called Douyin. And there are over 1 billion short form videos consumed daily on this service. And I read some statistic that said 80% of social media users in China have consumed video on a daily basis. So video has really changed the way people communicate, how they learn as well. So yeah. I think employers need to think about using video to communicate their employer branding messages, but also perhaps to think about how to leverage live streaming of video, something like this format for graduate recruiting opportunities, embedding short form video into job descriptions, and even obviously enabling applicants to apply with video. Because if I'm familiar with selfie videos, I really have that expectation that in addition to a resume, certainly for a young person, a resume is probably not that different or unique, but I can do a selfie video that I believe makes my application seem very differentiated and very unique. So giving consumers or candidates that opportunity is, I think, something that that companies need to think about. I think the fourth dimension is probably the responsiveness. So again, if I'm a consumer, I can ask questions about the product and get very quick answers because they want to convert an interested inquiry, into a sale. And so the expectation is that if a candidate has a question, they want a very quick response. And obviously recruiters are maybe not able to do that 24 hours a day, so the use of AI-powered chatbots is something to think about. And I think the final dimension is when we're interacting with consumers is they're expecting if they give something or if they input something, they want something back in return. So it's a very quid pro quo mindset. So if a retailer wants to capture their personal details for the membership program, then they expect something in return. Maybe that's a small gift or a discount coupon. So if you're trying to understand a candidate or you want more information from them so you can deliver more personalized content to them in the future, maybe you need to then give them an opportunity for expedited interview process. If you're asking them to take an assessment, for example, maybe you need to think about giving them something back, such as their own personal assessment results report and development report. And if you're asking for a referral, maybe you need to think about some quick rewards rather than just waiting for the typical reward for past probation, which is maybe months and months later. So there are a lot of the themes that we see that talent acquisition in China is taking from the consumer experience and the consumer mindset that today's candidates have.
Fascinating. And I think all of those, and you do see companies absolutely working in terms of, fast offer letters, feedback in terms of the development on post-assessment, etc. So I think thanks to each of you again in terms of, the challenge to businesses in understanding the new demographic who are looking for sort of an authentic brand and culture, and then bringing that to life, and also in terms of what companies are doing in terms of the persona journeys, creating an overall ecosystem that brings that candidate experience to life. And I think those themes feature in terms of content, convenience, video, we could probably talk about all day. So thanks so much. If we drill in a bit further now and we start looking at digital opportunities and anybody working in talent acquisition right now, many people, and some have officially referred to it as the Wild West, because it's obviously seen as a very rich business area. But in terms of productivity, as well as experience, offering experience. Beecher, it would be great if you could just maybe tell us a little bit in terms of how you think social media is impacting talent attraction and employer branding in sort of real ways, and where you see this going in the next few years.
Yeah, thank you. I guess this is the key question, because we're asking really what's working, right? And I mentioned
Yes.
that WeChat for some companies maybe generating on average in retail industry, for example, is 16% of total applications and 14% of total hires. But for some well-known consumer brands, WeChat is probably their #1 sourcing channel. So any given month, maybe that's between 20 to 35% of total applications can be delivered through WeChat. I talked already a little bit about social CRM and personalized messaging. I think that's still a little bit kind of tomorrow. Maybe we haven't seen the results of that just yet, but that's certainly going forward. But I think I want to share a little bit about what's going on with AI-powered bots, because I see that as addressing one of the key themes that I mentioned previously, which is the responsiveness. So in China, what we're seeing kind of a rapid adoption of AI-powered bots, and the bots can be used to engage with the candidates for really quickly responding to questions. So maybe it's a replacement of search. So tell me about some sales jobs in Beijing in the beauty care business. That's pretty straightforward. But then bots need to become increasingly sophisticated and answer questions around what is the culture of this organization like, or what's the learning and development program like. Now, the challenge, I think, so far is that bots have been relatively basic in how they respond. And so going forward, I think if companies really want to get a good return on their investment, the bot needs to be trained correctly, which takes time and investment, and probably linked, as I said, to the social CRM. Where I see bots having a more practical and instant and maybe more pragmatic added value in terms of efficiency maybe is around tackling the problem of interview scheduling. So a smart bot can maybe get around the traditionally very manual approach of double checking with the hiring manager when he or she is available, and then getting back to the candidate, and then going through a couple of rounds of that. So an intelligent bot can probably replace that process, so that the recruiter can step back a little bit and then focus a bit more on brand building or interviewing or the other higher value activities. But this level of bot intelligence can easily replace that sort of scheduling work. So maybe that helps to some degree answer a little bit of your question.
Okay, cool. And it's interesting, in a number of the councils that I work with right now, the effort that goes into training some of the bots and the return. So people think of it in terms of, it's a 4-year-old child, a 5-year. So the energy, people can see the value it can deliver, but it is taking a lot of energy. Before I pass on to Lopa and Catherine on this topic, we have a question from Amit Patel, and it relates a little bit to our last discussion, which was around, do you worry that people will jump on the environmental and ethical bandwagon and actually not come good on their promises? So I suppose this how are companies going to authentically meet consumers' needs? Do either of you want to do any, Catherine?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact data point, but I do remember reading an article about a very high drop-off rate for candidates that attrit in that first year after onboarding, when an organization's their talent brand really doesn't match the experience that the candidate gets when they join the company. And that's the risk that organizations run into if they're, if they don't share an authentic talent brand. And so, certainly, I see a strong need for organizations to be able to articulate their values very clearly, and have a culture that almost makes decisions based on those values, and that people can easily identify those values in their organization. I hope that organizations can find purpose within their culture, and that they can start to, if they're not already, demonstrate how they are giving back to community, and helping extend how their mission creates impact in a greater society. I think those organizations would do really well. I think anyone that moves away from what they're authentically able to deliver will run into problems.
Yeah, and you could always map that as a journey in terms of saying we understand this is where we are right now, this is where we want to be, and what are the steps that the company can make to sort of be more inspiring or to actually achieve those values going forward. Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Catherine. Lopa, in terms of social media, how it's impacting talent attraction and branding and what you see coming down the track, do you have anything to add in terms of what Beecher was saying?
Yeah, I think building on that and a little building on Amit's question and Catherine's response, I think social media in terms of what's happening today and how it can impact, it's about how the organization can translate what it's doing, the values, how it can give accessibility to a worldwide population through the curation of content onto the global platforms. But as Beecher was also alluding to, we're also seeing, certainly I'm seeing, how we can also segment that messaging into regional and even sometimes country-specific platforms. So it's really about how we can make sure that the reality of the organization is reflected through the messaging of social media. I think one of the things that we've been piloting and trialing, and certainly with TotalPack in these last 6 or 7 weeks that I've been here, is that we tend to now, we don't use any stock photos. So in terms of the messaging, it's very much peer-to-peer content and communication. And we see a huge engagement tactic on that. So right now, one of our future talent programs, which is very much focused on two platforms, has seen an 11% engagement rate in terms of individuals coming into the organization and engaging with us directly with regard to the messaging, because they're seeing individuals that they could be working with. So it's very much reality positioned out there. The one thing that I do think that we have to think about is how we do make sure that that reality of our employer brand or the value proposition appropriately and accurately reflected through the social media messaging, and how we can make sure that the individuals who are engaging with us, who then join our organization, don't see a divide in terms of what we positioned and what they saw and what they read about, and then is the same reality when they come into the organization. In terms of where I see this going in the next 2 to 5 years, I think it's still at an infancy. I think some organizations are hugely advanced, some are still catching up. I think there's a lot more happening. I do see video content. I know that's down for one of the next questions, but I think video content, which is short and sharp, works really well. And I'm looking forward to seeing things like maybe the use of augmented reality within talent acquisition, similar to how it's being used within the learning space. So I would expect that AI, certainly looking at gamification, looking at how we can engage with the candidate much more effectively, much more simplistically, but get a lot more from it in this sort of visual one-to-one contact. So I think we will see a lot more changes. And as you rightly said at the beginning, I'm hugely passionate about talent acquisition, and I think this is one of the most intriguing and exciting spaces to be in, certainly at the moment, certainly in this space.
Cool. Very fascinating. Catherine, what do you, in terms of your perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I work for a social organization, but what I love about using social as a channel is just the reach that you can, scale and the ability to target. For those of us that lead regions, multiple geographies, have global roles, there's definitely, a pressing need to customize your content and be sensitive to cultural nuances. And so, what I love about social is that there's a lot of data that's available to us that can really help us target our audiences, tailor our messages, and then actually be able to measure the effectiveness of our campaigns. And I think that we're able to get a lot quicker ROI than you know what we would have used in the past through traditional channels. So that for me is, you know, the biggest reward in using social.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it seems that finally it's like a pendulum. Everything swung global to simplify, standardize, make it more efficient. And now the technology is actually re-enabling those local nuances, the personal, all that kind of thing. It's interesting from an organizational point of view in terms of how you manage that, you know, because you know the alignment, you know, that it does stay sort of on message, is authentic, etc. So it's a fascinating area. Thank you. In terms of digital pilots that you're working on, is it possible, please, to just sort of maybe mention a couple, and they can be from the experience point of view that we've been talking about, but also companies, I suppose, are looking to simplify, make things leaner and more efficient, because that's then enabling their recruiters to spend more time one-on-one on the human touch. So Beecher, maybe you could kick us off again on that, please.
Yeah, sure. I think there's some pretty exciting stuff going on. Maybe I'll mention 3 examples.
Thank you.
One of the ones is GSK. They're a UK headquartered global pharmaceutical company. And they ran a very exciting candidate experience project here in Asia over the last maybe 4 to 6 months. And what they were trying to do, or one aspect of it, I should say, was that they looked at their job descriptions, and I think they counted on average each job description had around 500, 600 words. And they were just sort of thinking in terms of the way the next generation, the younger generation, communicate with each other is often, as we just discussed, video-based. So they decided to sort of reimagine job descriptions, and they had a visual job description project, and that was to replace the very text-heavy job descriptions with more icons, images, graphics, and video to dramatically reduce the number of words, but enhance the readability and ultimately the conversion rate of candidates who engage with those job descriptions. It's almost like the outcome was like an infographic, and it's really just positioning or repositioning, the way job descriptions communicate information and the format in which that information is communicated to better suit the younger generation's learning and communication styles. And I don't have the details of exactly how the outcome has been, but certainly they've been very successful, and I received a number of awards already for innovative candidate experience. So that was pretty interesting. I thought that was relevant to share. The second one was from Henkel. Pardon me?
No, very cool. Go on, sorry.
The second one was Henkel, which is a German headquarters global FMCG company. And they had been running campus recruiting for quite a number of years, as many multinationals here in China have done. The challenge with graduate recruiting here in China is that it's a very, very large country, and there's literally millions of graduates. I think this year there's 9 million graduates. So dealing with the application volume, but also the geographic scope is pretty daunting. So recently Henkel went for a fully digital approach, which included online promotions, digital promotions, but also online application, online assessment, and then the use of algorithms to screen those candidates. And they utilized, as we talked about a little bit about before, a video application for a language check, and I think they also checked for creativity, among some other things. And that really ensured that the candidates that went through for the face-to-face assessment center were of the highest qualities. And then the outcome has been really wonderful for Henkel. They've been able to get fantastic new hires who perform very well, but they're able to hire, from a much wider geographic area, which is important because their business is growing in more and more locations outside of the major cities. I think what I was very excited to see was that school diversity hiring improved pretty significantly too. And that's one of the diversity challenges for China. Often it's not necessarily around ethnic groups or religious groups. It's around trying to hire people from a wider range of universities rather than just the famous universities, because previously it's been very difficult to understand the quality of the candidate from these other universities. But obviously gender diversity hiring improved significantly too, and they were able to use a much broader, deeper set of data from the assessments, from the resumes, and using those algorithms to focus on the best fit candidates. So the outcomes across those dimensions were wonderful. And the third example I'd like to share with you is from a car company called NIO. NIO is a China headquartered electric vehicle unicorn. A company. It's often billed as China's Tesla. The digital issue that they were the recruiting issue that they were facing, that they approached with a digital innovation, was to overcome what for many companies is a problem, which is candidate no-show for the interview. Often a candidate will apply and get an interview, but maybe they don't turn up for that interview. So they wanted to think or reimagine how that process may happen. And again, through Wechat, they're able to deliver a very digital experience. And they replaced the interview invitation with a dynamic H5 game, where the candidate would sort of enter the game and unlock more information about NIO, but also about the interview details, or the interview details themselves, by navigating around the game. And because it was fun, because it was engaging, they were able to dramatically increase their interview showing rates, and then that led obviously to faster hiring cycles. So three kind of exciting ways, which were very lean, frankly, but which were delivered to address different issues or challenges within the overall candidate or talent acquisition process.
Fascinating, because I suppose it also shows that if you really go in and live that journey, that persona, and you really zone in on that particular issue, really fantastic examples. Thanks a lot, Beecher. Catherine, what do you see in terms of digital pilots that people or you, LinkedIn, are engaging in?
Yeah, so I think, starting with what I would call low-hanging fruit, things that have been working well for us recently. In our EMEA business, we launched this similar to the environment that this call has been set up by. Running events via Blue Jeans, so a video conference. We actually invited some of our employees to be part of a panel where they would share their experience of relocating to Dublin, and then we automated the sourcing at the back end. So built what we call a total addressable market. Within that total addressable market would be qualified candidates that we were wanting to relocate or would be suitable for relocation to at this time Dublin. We invited them to join the call and learn a little bit about what the experience had been like for some of our now employees that once upon a time had sat outside of Ireland, in a role that they were enjoying, and gave them the opportunity to hear from our employees about what it was like to work at LinkedIn, but also more importantly, what were some of the considerations that they went through in that relocation, and hear firsthand what that experience had been like for our employees. So very low cost investment using technology in our employees, and then use sourcing tools to be able to do the outreach. So we found that to be a very effective way of sharing a little bit about our brand, but also creating value for those that would be considering an opportunity like that. And we've now scaled those for different markets. They seem to be a medium that actually connects well with lots of different cultures and functions, industries. So that's been something that's worked well for us. We've also been using live events. So as I shared before, one of the value propositions that we like to share with our candidates and prospective employees is the culture of LinkedIn. And so we came up with this idea. Actually, one of our employees in the US who came from a background of live entertainment went to what I would call a very traditional event of ours in the past, where a panel would attend and talk about the culture and values of LinkedIn. And that particular employee, when he attended, didn't really feel like it was authentic of our culture. And this employee, coming from a live entertainment background, felt like maybe complementing his live entertainment background with his own authentic experience of what it was like to work at LinkedIn, he decided to trial this event, which allowed employees to showcase their what we call hidden talents. Ended up being a bit of a talent show. So our employees, if they sang, they would sing. If they played an instrument, they would play an instrument. And then we invited again, candidates that we were interested in to come and experience firsthand what the culture of LinkedIn is like. And we've made immediate hires from both of these. So I guess the digital aspect is obviously the sourcing piece, the automated sourcing piece. And then, in some cases, use of technology to facilitate that. And then obviously we then moved them on to what we would call like a nurture strategy. Once we acknowledge that they're interested in hearing about opportunities with us, then serving up media, on a variety of different channels to keep them engaged and front of mind for opportunities when they arise.
Fascinating. Like again, and it's that combination of sort of leveraging the technology and connecting it, and
Right.
with the live thing, really. Lopa, thanks, Catherine. Lopa, anything that you'd like to add on that?
Sure. I think so. Building on the previous panelists' comments, I think we can safely say, from a spectrum of 0 to 10, from those organizations that are just foraying out into this space to those that are absolutely rocking it and killing it and doing everything and trialing everything that's out there, organizations are on a different level. I would say we're probably more in the middle at the moment with the organization that I'm currently with. And in terms of the pilots, you can look at it from two angles, from the internal perspective and the external perspective of what we're doing faced with the candidates and the relationship piece. And what are we doing internally to make sure our processes are more efficient, more streamlined, maybe a little more innovative and reflect the internal reality of the organization. So the ones I can probably talk to you about more actively within your current organization is video interviewing, really around how can we bring to Beecher's point with the organization, the GSK pilot, not as extreme as that for the moment, but how can we make sure that video interviewing can create a more engaging experience with the individual? How can we maybe help them to self-select out of a process? If we look at different regions and certainly volumes of applications, we know that the Asia region for us is one where we have a huge number of applicants per position. So video interviewing is one that I'm actively looking at right now, and with an implementation for later this year. You're also looking at how we can better maybe screen and not so much abdicate the decision-making responsibility, but how can we better screen the number of talents that are coming into a pipeline and understand how and where the greater match is. So we're looking at a couple of organizations at the moment, actively talking to one about using AI or algorithm-based technology for better matching criteria. To make sure that we're really using the recruiter time more efficiently. So this is an area where I think digital simplification is going to help us. But I think actually from previous experiences, having piloted and implemented AI solutions, it's superbly exciting and interesting, and that's really about how can we really bring down the experience in terms of the time used to look at whether or not an individual has a greater match to a profile. Some of the facial recognition technologies bring it down to about 12 minutes, 7 questions. the other side of that goes back to the question posed by one of the participants, Amit, that actually, so how do you make sure that the integrity and the ethics of that is maintained, and how do you quieten down the noise in terms of, well, great, now robots are selecting us for positions, and that's not the case, so the change management and communication piece becomes critical. But I think in terms of, simplification, improving the attraction process, helping us to streamline, it can all really help. But I think we have to be really careful to make sure that what we select is fit for purpose for our organization. Just because another company's done it and it's worked really well doesn't mean it really works for us. It's a question I guess we have to all think about when we think about digital pilots, and certainly what works for us may not always work for others, let's say.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it is. It comes back to sort of what is authentic. So in terms of what experience, what technology, and there are, of course, these questions in terms of the validity of the algorithms. I know is something that's discussed quite a lot in the Talent Acquisition Council at the moment as well. But you can see, if you walk through in steps through those journeys that people are going through, from the GSK to the Henkel, the NEO, and the examples Catherine shared and you shared, Catherine, there are a lot of things that people are doing and can do, but you really need to see, are they right for my organization? We're nearly at the end. I would ask our panelists maybe in 20 seconds in terms of any final comments from them in terms of becoming more talent-centric, or observations from the call today. We also have a question I think we will need to address as a follow-up. We've been asked a question, what do we see in terms of, we see global trends in talent acquisition, but then obviously there's a lot of geopolitical issues at the moment. So in terms of, is there a potential impact in terms of the current China-US relationship? So, might that impact? So we may follow that up as an email, or if you have any comments on that. So a quick close up and then I'll round up.
Well, I can go quickly first. I think for anyone that has not, tried to be a candidate for a while, I would strongly recommend doing that. So what I mean by that is going through your process as if you're a candidate, because I recently did this applying for a job through our own applicant tracking system and going on that journey, and it's definitely very interesting to experience firsthand what it's like to get frustrated, if the technology doesn't work or not receive a response immediately. I think it really does bring it front of mind what the experience is like for candidates today. And I think the piece on automation is there's a time and a place, and it doesn't always make sense to use some tools. So I just be very careful about where you use the automation, and that it should never be at the expense of the personal connection and the relationship.
Wise words. Thanks, Catherine. Lopa, Beecher, do you want to jump in? Oh, very quickly.
So for me, three things. Translate the reality of the organization through the process and make sure that the EVP that you have in the organization is absolutely delivering on what's being sold through that process. Building on definitely what Catherine was saying in terms of the journey for the individual going through that process. And my main one is always fit for purpose, is what you're doing throughout the talent attraction process, where the social media, where the tech, where the process is. Does it really fit your organization? Is it reality for you? And be really selfish and specific about what you want to implement and why you want to do that.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Lopa. Beecher.
I fully agree with Catherine and Lopa. I would just probably round up by saying I think there are kind of three diverging kind of trends. Obviously, technology is changing very, very quickly. The demographics of who we're trying to hire is becoming more stratified or more differentiated, probably is a better way to describe it.
Yeah.
And the way that people interact with each other, social media is also a mega trend. And so the combination of these three trends, demographics, social, and technology, is creating a very exciting, but to some folks maybe potentially challenging environment where things have to change in order to be competitive, or in order to be differentiated. I personally find that very exciting. I think there's a lot of opportunity for organizations to capture those three trends, and so the life and professional careers of talent acquisition and employee branding professionals going forward is just becoming more and more interesting.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it is as somebody sort of who moved into HR over the course of her career, I absolutely and find this space really interesting. We're out of time. I really want to thank each of you, Catherine, Lopa, Beecher, for being very open, very informative and insightful in our call today. Just some quick wrap-ups. There is some related research. Also in the deck, there are some upcoming webcasts. You can download the report, and thanks please for sharing. There are related councils, because both Catherine and Lopa are involved in our council programs. We have discussions like these all the time in the council, so it's good fun. And if you can please complete the evaluation. On behalf of the conference board and our panelists, I want to thank everybody for participating today. Hope to see you on the upcoming webcasts. The next one is on the future of talent assessment on June the 4th. Thanks again, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.